Hello, welcome back. Today's another day where I deal with the rules for games, and this is HeroQuest. Demonstration, explanation, this is what we do here. This is what I have planned for today. I'm going to say right now that I have enjoyed HeroQuest for many years, and I still really enjoy the game. I have had the chance to play it as much as I would like, but I played way too much of it as a teenager with my family. And we're going to be dealing with a whole bunch of stuff we haven't covered before, certainly not in the last couple of weeks, and I'm rolling around again. So I'm going to put up a poll. Feel free to take part in that poll, and I'm going to get started in a second. And I will be keeping an eye on chat for those of you who are interested, who need to ask questions, or you want to give feedback if you play the game or you don't play the game. HeroQuest is obviously based off D&D, if you were not aware. I'm sure some of you do know. But anyway, let's get cracking. That's why you're here. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to How to RPG. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about role-playing games. And you might say that HeroQuest is a role-playing game, but it's more of a board game. Now, it is a board game based off a role-playing game called Dungeons & Dragons. And all of sort of the basic mechanical aspects of Dungeons & Dragons are connected to HeroQuest. I've already covered just recently the basic rules, basic combat. Today we're doing complex combat, which means we're going to cover combat very briefly again. That process, it's very simple. And I'm going to be using maps and miniatures and dice because, or the game board, should I say, and I'm going to be covering treasure. So there's treasure. Treasure's a big part of HeroQuest. I'm also going to be covering the artifacts because out of the treasure, the best treasure is always the artifact. And so how that will sort of interplay with your game. So that's what I want to do. And I will be keeping an eye on chat, so feel free to chuck in your comments, particularly if you've played the game or you want to play the game, you don't know very much about it. Anyway, let's get started. Let's go right into this. Let's start off with just demonstrating combat. So we're going to get rid of these closed doors. And probably the easiest way is when you're taking your turn is broken up to, and I've said this before, movement and then an action. And there are 6 things you can do as an action, okay? One of them is that you can attack, you can cast a spell, if you have spells that is. You can search for treasure, you can search for traps, you can search for a secret door, okay? Or you can disable a trap, if that you found. So those are the 6 things you can do. So when we start off our turn, let's just stay with the barbarian. You roll your dice, 2 of these things, 6-sided dice, are rolled really low, and of course what you do is you want to move up 1, 2, and you open the door. Okay, opening the door is not an action, it's a free action. You can do as many of those as you like. Okay, looking and opening doors. But then of course, then everybody else has their turn. And then finally, the monsters get to take their turn, provided there are monsters in play. The only reason I'm laying out the center room, again, I'll make it clear, you don't normally do this. Okay, normally you would look and then you'd place down the door and then you'd place things out once you actually open the door and look inside. I'm just doing this to speed up the process for me. Okay, so let's just fast track things and get this door open as well. Okay, imagine we do some more moving and we get a door open and we're going to get ourselves into a fight. So we move up to our goblin and we're going to fight them. Now with the barbarian, again, very simple. When you're attacking, you're using 3 of the combat dice, these white dice. And if you are a goblin, and you are attacking the goblin, you're only going to be having 1 defense dice to defend. So you roll your attacks as you normally would. Now you can't attack diagonally, so you have to make sure you're either horizontal or vertical to do this. So make sure you position yourself correctly. Okay, and you can't move diagonally, so that's another thing to consider. But anyway, so we're in position and we make our attack. For every skull, we potentially do a wound. The shields mean nothing. If we get a monster shield, that also means nothing if we're making an attack. Okay, so we get 1 wound potentially. You get to defend with your monster. You get 1 defense dice. Roll it. I got a skull, so I don't stop it. I have to roll with my monster, the monster shield, the black one. If I get that, I could stop that wound getting through. But I won't, and that will wind up with that goblin getting killed and dying. It's gone. Out of play. Okay. So that is the basics of combat. And the same thing applies when monsters are attacking you. Okay. If we were to do something like that, it's going to look pretty much the same. So, for example, if eventually it rolls around to Zargon's turn and we have this Chaos Warrior come up and attack us, which is totally possible. The Dread Warrior, should I say, the Dread Warrior. Here's our Dread Warrior. Our Dread Warrior uses 4 combat dice, which is a lot. It's going to be pretty painful. Our Barbarian, if they are defending, is going to be using 2 combat dice, okay, because their defense is 2. So you roll your attack for your monster. If it's your turn, every skull is a potential wound. The shields mean nothing. Shields mean nothing when you're attacking. They only apply when you're defending, and then your Barbarian will try to defend that 1 skull or 1 potential wound. They get a skull, which means nothing, and a monster shield will not help you. You have to get the white shield, the hero shield. So unfortunately, in this case, we lose 1 body point from our Barbarian. Very, very simple. So there's combat in a nutshell. I wanted to go over this just very quickly because I know it's listed, this video is listed as complex combat. Really what we're looking at today is we're looking at these. We're going to start with this, and then I'm going to deal with the treasure cards. But I wanted to deal with artifacts first. The reason being is these are the most desirable items in the game. Out of everything that you could possibly have, that is the thing that you really want to have the most out of anything else. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through each one, read them out, and explain how they would be applied to your tabletop game. I'm going to have to take my glasses off to make this work. And that's sort of just part and parcel of this. Let's start with the first one. Now you usually shuffle these up. You'll find with artifacts are one of those sorts of things that when you're using the artifact in your game, you probably only find 1 artifact per adventure. You're probably not going to find any more than that. Why is that? It's because they are really good. That's all it is. So every adventure is probably going to include 1 artifact or no artifacts, but probably 1 artifact. Okay, Elixir of Life. So this small bottle of pearly liquid brings a dead hero back to life, restoring all of their body and mind points. This potion can only be used once, so it's a single-use item. What essentially this means is if your character winds up taking way too much damage, say your Barbarian here, and they lose all of their body points, and they lose all of their mind points, then you can use this bottle, okay? It's very, very simple. It's not very complicated. It's really, really simple. So this is your get out of jail free card, the Elixir of Life. Next one, we have the Rod of Telekinesis. So once per quest, you may use this rod to trap a monster within magical force. A trapped monster misses its next turn. The spell can be resisted immediately by the monster, rolling 1 6-sided dice for each of their mind points. If a 6 is rolled, it resists the spell. So, to give you an example of how this might work in your game, the Rod of Telekinesis, if you decide to use it, okay, which you can, how would you go about doing this? Well, against something like the Dread Warrior, we'll take our Dread Warrior here. Here's our Dread Warrior card. Let's move this out of the way. And you'll notice that their mind points here are listed as 3. So that means you have to have 3 6-sided dice to be able to do this. So what you do is you grab 3 6-sided dice, you're going to roll those, and that will help determine exactly what you get. If you roll a 6, you will resist the effect. I rolled a 1, and a 4. So I resist the effect of the Rod of Telekinesis. So I get to do that, and that basically means that the Dread Warrior, when it comes around to having its turn, it does not get to do anything. It misses its turn. Okay? Now, it can only be used once per quest, so once you've done it, put it aside and use it for the next adventure if you manage to survive. Okay, very, very simple. Okay, let's get rid of that and get this out of the way. Next one. Boron's armor. Boron's armor is magical armor. This magical suit of plate mail gives you 2 extra defense dice. Unlike normal plate armor or mail, this mysterious ultralight metal armor does not slow down its wearer. So in other words, you won't be able to you won't be changing your speed. Most characters, when you're moving, will roll 2 6-sided dice. You won't have to worry about changing that. Okay. May be combined with the helmet and the shield. So you can have a helmet or a shield or both, and it can't be used by the wizard, but it can be used by the barbarian, the dwarf, and the elf, but not the wizard. So how does that look? Well, when you're defending, okay, say if you are the barbarian in this case, if you are defending, let's get rid of this dice, this card here for a second. If you are defending, you'll notice that the defense dice for the barbarian is 2 combat dice, defense dice. But when you're wearing this, you get 2 extra defense dice, making it slightly better and twice as good, in fact. Having twice the number of defense dice is really, really good, which is what makes this particular piece of equipment so useful to you, and the fact that you can still roll 2 6-sided dice, okay, when you're moving, rather than have your speed reduced. In other words, lose one of these dice. Because it is, like, the benefit of plate armor is great, but you move slower, quite a bit slower, in fact. What's this, Pale Rider? Never played before, but I remember the ads in the Dragon magazine. Okay, and the reason they were in Dragon magazine is because, as I said, HeroQuest is based off Dungeons and Dragons, the tabletop role-playing game. I do have a board game, City of Thieves. I think it's called the box. It's in the attic. Now, the City of Thieves might be based off Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone's City of Thieves fighting fantasy books. I can't remember exactly, but I know they put out a whole lot of board games as well for that. Okay, so there's Boromir's armor. I'll just grab some more water. If I don't explain anything properly, please let me know and I will return and try again, okay? So if I make any balls ups, let me know. Calrell, how's it going? How are you? Next piece of equipment. Fortune's Longsword. This is a weapon. This long blade enables you to attack diagonally, giving you 3 attack dice. Once per quest, the hero may use its power to re-roll 1 attack die, okay? May not be used by the wizard, so it can only be used by the barbarian, the dwarf, and the elf, but not the wizard. So how does this work? Again, let's grab our barbarian. Now, you might have remembered I said you have to be either horizontal or vertical when you're attacking. You can't be diagonal, but now we can. Fortune's Longsword allows us to do that. We would normally use 3 attack dice for our barbarian, okay? So that's not a big change because we have a broadsword. But the broadsword does not allow you to attack diagonally, and that's what the big benefit is. So we roll this, and every skull, of course, is potentially a wound against our Dread Warrior. The benefit is, if there is a dice that we roll that we don't want, we can re-roll one of those dice, okay, once per quest. So I rolled three skulls, so I don't need to worry about that. But if I had rolled another attack, and it looked like this, well, I can decide I don't want to have all shields. I need to get at least 1 strike on Dread Warrior. So I can re-roll one of these per quest. And I've got another shield, so that's not going to help me very much. But essentially that's the process. The hope is that you roll another skull. If you can get another skull, potentially you can increase the amount of damage you do, okay? Or you will actually get a strike in when you fail to roll any skulls. So Fortune's Longsword, pretty good. Okay, next one. Orc's Bane. So this is a weapon. When using this magical short sword, you roll 2 attack dice. So that means you roll 2 of these. You may attack twice if attacking an orc. May not be used by the wizard. So in other words, we need to have an orc to attack for this to really be useful. Against a Dread Warrior, not so useful. But if there was no Dread Warrior in the room and we were dealing with a Orc, let's just say we're here, we get 2 dice, okay, and we get to attack twice. Normally when you take your attack action, you only get to do 1 attack. So it's a big deal when you can attack twice. The drawback is you only get, as if you're the Barbarian, you would only get 2 attack dice rather than your 3 for your broadsword. But it's really useful for a dwarf, and it's really useful for the elf. So I would say probably not an item that you want your Barbarian to have, so probably take them off the cards. But something like your dwarf, okay, could definitely benefit quite a lot from that, or even the elf. Now you're rolling 2 dice, okay, and you get to do it twice against an orc. So you would roll, every skull you get is potentially a wound. I got none on that attack, and the second one on your turn, okay, there we go. We get 2 potential wounds, and hopefully the orc doesn't defend those. Now the great thing about this particular weapon is it's not a single use per quest. You can use it like that all the time. That's what makes it so strong. So if you can get hold of Orc's Bane, well done. Okay, let's get rid of this one. Next, Phantom Blade. This is a weapon. This ornate dagger gives you 1 attack dice. Once per quest, when you attack with the dagger, your target may not defend themselves as the weapon passes through their armor. So this is one of those weapons that, although it can be used by any character, it's probably not a weapon you want to use, okay, on every character. It's definitely the sort of weapon potentially that you want to stick with the wizard. If you can give this to the wizard and it's stuck having to make some sort of attack, you're probably going to be better off giving this to the wizard. Because now, even though the wizard doesn't get very much in terms of attacking, okay, their attack dice is only a 1, it hasn't changed that at all. What is beneficial though is you can't defend yourself against it. That's once per quest, not every single time you make an attack, but once per quest. So that means if you make an attack and you get a skull, you're guaranteed of doing at least 1 body point worth of damage every quest. Doesn't sound like a lot, but in a pinch it's going to make a big difference to a wizard who will eventually run out of spells. So there is the Phantom Blade. I suppose the argument could be made that because it's potentially capable of causing 1 guaranteed wound against a monster, that any character could potentially benefit from it. But I would say that probably the wizard is going to be the one to go with. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Okay, next. Ring of Return. When invoked, this magical ring returns all heroes that the ring wearer can see to the starting point of the quest. It can only be used once, so it is a single-use item. Once you use it, that's it. It doesn't get used again. Now, why would you use this? Imagine you are all in the room, okay, and you're all engaged in a heavily pitched battle. This is where this item would potentially be really useful, particularly when you are heavily outnumbered and engaged in way too many things that you can't really deal with. So how do you deal with that? Well, this is your get out of free card. So the Ring of Return, okay? You invoke it and it returns all the heroes back to the starting point. Just like that. Everybody goes back to the staircase, wherever the staircase is. So you don't have to worry about moving. So this is essentially the get out of free card. Now, why would you do this? Probably if you decide you don't want to try to complete the adventure. It doesn't state it as such, but there's nobody forcing you saying you have to complete the adventure till your character is dead. If you decide that things aren't going well, you could just bug out. That's always an option. So, Ring of Return. Next one. Okay, we have Ring of move a few characters back into the room, or at least not have it quite so busy as it was before. I don't know how that's going to work. We'll just chuck everybody in here. Just chuck everybody in here. It'll do. Okay. Ring of Fortitude. This is a magical ring, and it raises the hero's body points by 1. So for a wizard who only has 4 body points, you would now have 5 body points. Not 4, but 5. Okay. For a barbarian who has 8 body points, if you wear this, you now have 9 body points. For a dwarf, you had 7, now you have 8. For an elf wearing this, you normally have 6, you now have 7. The Ring of Fortitude will benefit every character, but the character that has the greatest chance of death is probably your wizard. So it's probably the item that the wizard would like to have the most. Okay, it's that one. Okay, next. Talisman of Lore. This is a magical medallion, increasing your mind points by 1 for as long as it is worn. So that's an indefinite change. So essentially, for a wizard who wears the Talisman of Lore, their current mind points are 6, and if you wear this, it would wind up being 7. Now you can see the benefit here only when it comes to dealing with spells. Something like the barbarian who has 2 mind points would have 3 mind points, the dwarf who has 3 mind points would now have 4, and the elf who has 4 mind points would now have 5. I could have used the Ring of Return in high school for a few of those pop quizzes. I'm sure you could have. So yeah, Talisman of Lore, probably not as good as the Ring of Fortitude, but if you're dealing with spellcasters, it's a big deal. Okay, next one. Spirit Blade. This is a weapon. This is a magical broadsword. It has an airy handle of carved bone. When using it, roll 3 attack dice. So that is 3 of these dice here. Or roll 4 if attacking an undead monster, such as a skeleton, zombie, mummy, and it may not be used by the wizard. Only the barbarian, dwarf, and elf can use it. Okay. So I'm just going to shift this out of the way. So ultimately, let's grab the dwarf for now. So this is the item that you want to use and be wielding when you're dealing with something like the undead. It's useful for all the characters other than the wizard because its attack bonus is, you get 3 attack dice, which is a big deal. That's pretty high. But the fact that you get to roll 4 against undead is a huge benefit. You're not going to get the benefit here quite so much attacking these types of creatures, but if I take them all away and we're dealing with a totally different makeup, such as zombies and maybe a skeleton or a mummy, well then that changes everything, doesn't it? Because now instead of using just 3 attack dice to make your attack, if you are the dwarf, you get 4. So you would roll 4 of these against the undead. I get 2 skulls, and of course they would defend. Okay, something like a zombie doesn't have a huge amount of hit points, which is always nice, and undead don't necessarily have the best defense, but the defense dice for this zombie, unfortunately, is 3 dice. Okay, so if I get 2 wounds, roll that, I get no monster shields, I don't stop any of that, so you wind up taking 2 body points, and a zombie can't stand up to that. It's going to be dead. What do you got here? I figure at Fred Huber, keep you from talking to yourself yesterday. It falls to you today. That's right, Pale Rider. It does. Otherwise, I am talking to myself, aren't I? You know what the problem is when you start talking to yourself? Then you've got to seriously consider medication, don't you? Okay. All right, here we go. Spell Ring. This ring enables a hero to cast 1 spell 2 times, not simultaneously. Okay, 1 spell 2 times. So, At the beginning of a quest, the wearer of this ring must declare which of the spells are stored in the ring. So what this essentially means is you can only ever cast if you are a elf or a wizard, and you can cast spells. You can only cast that spell once, and once you've used it, it's done. But this allows you to store one of those spells that you have in the ring so you can use it twice. Not on the same turn, but you can use it again, because normally when you use a spell, you put it aside and you have to wait until the next adventure. So really useful for the wizard and the elf, not useful to a barbarian or a dwarf. What you got here? Did they have different boards, maps for the game? So for example, something like HeroQuest, you'll notice that the structure of the board itself is laid out in such a way that there are different shaped rooms. And what you do is you use blocks and barriers to block off things. You put the doors in different places. You wouldn't use the entire board. You might only use this section of the board, or this section of the board, or just this section. Maybe the center as well. So you could have different layouts and formats based off what areas you would block off. And there are little tiles here that allow you to do that. So I can block off this part of the dungeon if I wanted to, so that this is no longer really an option to get to. Okay, that would block off that area completely. So you would only be dealing with that area. I can even block off, if I want to make my dungeon a little bit smaller, I can block off here. And then I would only use a portion of the game board. And of course you would have a predetermined map that you would follow and lay out as you go. The board game has already some sort of thing set up, so there are adventures already set up with maps that you would follow, but you can create your own because there's a blank one there as well. Okay, let's just get that out of the way, and I'll keep going. Some of the best conversations you've had are with yourself? Oh, okay, all right, let's get back to artifacts, shall we? All right, let's do this one. Wizard's Cloak. This magical cloak made of shimmering fabric is covered with mystical runes. It can be worn only by the wizard, giving them 1 extra defense dice. So it doesn't apply to a barbarian, a dwarf, or an elf. You must be the wizard, okay, the wizard character. And normally your defense dice is 2 for your wizard. You now get to have another dice. When you're making defenses against attacks from monsters, you get to roll 3 dice, not 2. So that's a big benefit. Okay, it's not double the number of defense dice, but it's, 1 extra dice can make all the difference. You're dealing with small numbers here. Okay, cool. Wizard's Cloak. Next one. Wand of Magic. This magical wand allows a hero to cast 2 separate and different spells on their turn instead of 1 single spell. So you might have remember I said that this is a 2-action economy game where you get to move and use an action, or use your action and move. So what this now allows you to do is you could move, cast a spell, and then cast a separate spell, okay, on the same turn. On the same turn you get to cast 2 spells. So really helpful for a spellcaster, probably more useful to the wizard, but the elf could also benefit from it. Elves only usually have 3 spells, but a wizard has 9 spells. They have 3 sets of 3, so they have 9 spells. You can't cast exactly the same spell, because it does state cast 2 separate and different spells on your turn, so you would still use up those spells. So it's a little bit different to the ring of spells. It's a little bit different to the spell ring. But really useful. Very, very powerful. Our last artifact here is the Wizard's Staff. This is a long, ancient staff. It glows with a soft blue light. It can only be used by the wizard, obviously. So we get rid of that. Oh no, that is the wizard. So it can only be used by the wizard, giving them a 2 attack dice and the ability to strike diagonally. So that is a huge advantage for anybody who doesn't know and doesn't remember. You can only attack vertically or horizontally. You can't attack from a diagonal position. So now you can. Normally, your wizard only gets 1 attack dice. But with this staff, this wizard staff, okay, you get 2. And you do not need to necessarily be vertical or horizontal when you make your attack. You can be diagonal, which makes all the difference. A bit more versatility and a better chance of hitting that skeleton and hopefully doing some damage. And of course I rolled really badly and didn't hit nothing. Okay, wizard staff. Okay, now the deck you're going to come across the most is the treasure pile. Now this treasure pile is reduced. I've taken out a lot of the repeats quite deliberately. And every time you get into a room, every character can potentially search that room once for treasure as long as there's no monsters. So let's get rid of the monsters because the monsters can't be there. Unless, of course, you wind up with a wandering monster, then it's going to be a different story. Okay, so there's no monsters in the room, so every character can potentially turn over a treasure card when they take the search for treasure action. So let's go through these. It means that with a group of 4, you have potentially 4 lots of treasure in the room. There is a point where you do not want to keep playing the adventure because the benefits to you aren't going to be that great. Anyway, first one here. Potion of Strength. So if you search the room and you find treasure, you turn over the card, this is what you get. You find a small purple flask. You can drink this strange smelling liquid at any time, enabling you to roll 2 extra combat dice the next time you attack. This may only be used once. Do not return this card to the deck. So every time during your adventure, there's fewer and fewer treasure items in the deck. So what this essentially means is, okay, when you drink this, and you can drink it as a free action. Drinking a potion is not an action. So for those of you who are getting this confused with D&D, it doesn't work that way. If you decide that you want to do this, you can, okay. You get your 2 combat dice, 1 combat dice if you're a wizard. You drink this just before you make your attack, and you add 2 extra combat dice, okay. It's very, very simple. Now you can do it on a different turn or on the same turn. It doesn't matter. There's no difference to it. So you don't need to concern yourself. A very useful item. Every character wants to have a potion of strength. What do you got here? In the companion book of Beckme, introduced the quarterstaff as an optional weapon for magic users. Okay, I wasn't aware of that. I haven't actually looked at the companion book. Next, Potion of Defense. Amidst a collection of old bottles, you find a small vial containing a clear liquid. You can drink this potion at any time, giving you 2 extra combat dice the next time you defend. So this is not for attacking, but for defending. This may only be used once. Do not return this card to the deck. So it's a single-use item, and instead of, say, the wizard, if it were to drink the potion of defense, instead of 2 defense dice if you're dealing with an attack from something, okay, you would be dealing with a few extra. You get 2 extra combat dice to defend with against that skeleton. And so every shield that is a hero shield is something that you can stop. So the one hero shield on there means potentially you can stop 1 wound coming through from the skeleton if they manage to wound you at all, or potentially wound you. And so the potion of defense is useful for every single character. Every single character can benefit from a potion of defense. Okay, let's get rid of this. Next, Heroic Brew. You are surprised to find a leather bag hanging on the wall. If you drink its contents before you attack, you can make 2 attacks instead of 1 attack. This may only be used once. Do not return it to the deck. So it's a single-use item, just as before. And basically what that means is, instead of making 1 attack, you can make 2 attacks on your turn. So you might move, and then you take the attack action, and With a wizard, you might be just using your dagger and you only get to roll one attack. I get nothing. Well, I drink this potion, I can have 2 attacks. It's a free action, doesn't use up your turn. So I can make another attack, and I still don't hit because, of course, I'm only rolling 1 attack dice, so that's not terribly useful. But being able to make 2 attacks on your turn is a big deal. Probably more useful to something like the Barbarian, but the Elf and the Dwarf can certainly benefit from Heroic Brew. Next one. Potion of Healing. You knew this was coming. In a bundle of rags, you find a small bottle of bluish liquid. You can drink this healing potion at any time, restoring a number of body points equal to a roll of 1 red, die. So 6-sided die, 1 red die. You cannot, however, exceed your starting number of body points. This may only be used once. Do not return it to the deck. So you can only use it once during an adventure, and it can only be used once, full stop. Okay, and it doesn't go back into the treasure pile, so you're not going to find another one. Okay, there's only one in the deck. Is it one in the deck, or there's a couple? I can't remember. There's not an infinite number of. There's not a lot of potions in any treasure pile. You won't find a lot. So what that essentially means is you just roll a 6-sided dice to use your potion of healing. I roll a 5. That's how many body points I can restore up to my maximum body points. So I can restore whatever I have lost, as a wizard. Say I have only got 1 body point left, it would restore me back up to 4. If I was a barbarian and I was on something like 1 body point, this would be super useful because rolling a 5 would mean I would gain 5 body points. If I was on 1, I can go up right up to potentially 8. That's my maximum for this. So yeah, useful item. Next, gems. Gems, this is basically just treasure. Now remember, when you're dealing with treasure or anything like that, you can only search for treasure when the room is empty of monsters, no monsters around. So tucked into the toe of an old boot, you find a small gem worth 35 gold coins. Record the money on your character sheet. Do not return this card to the deck. So you're only going to find this card once during your adventure. Very simple. Next one. Jewels. You find a small wooden box. It is simple looking and very old. Within it you discover that it is lined with velvet and contains very small jewels worth 50 gold coins. Record the money on your character sheet. Do not return this card to the deck. So you're only going to find this card once and then it will be gone during your adventure. You want to have money, by the way, because gold and money in this game is really important. You can buy equipment, and I talked about equipment the last time I was talking about HeroQuest. So gold. You find a loose stone and tear it from the wall. Behind it, you discover a small leather pouch wrapped in an old rag. Peering inside, you find 25 gold coins. Record the money on your character sheet. Do not return this card to the deck. So once this card is found and used, you don't get to play it or find it again. It doesn't go to the bottom of the deck. Next. This is another one. It's just a different sum. Same sort of thing going on here, but it's 15 gold. So amidst old rags, tattered from robes and soiled blankets, you find a collection of 15 gold coins. So you record it on your character sheet and you do not return it to the treasure deck. You're only going to find this card once. Next. Wandering monsters. Now, there are a lot of wandering monsters in the deck for the treasure pile. Okay, so when you're searching, the more and more you search and the closer you get to the bottom of the deck, the chances are the more you're going to wind up finding a wandering monster. Rather than treasure, you get a wandering monster. As you are searching, a monster stalks you and attacks. Zargon places the wandering monster listed in the quest book, and it's different for every adventure. You place it on any square next to you. Sorry. Sorry, people. I'm having a little bit of trouble. So, wandering monster. As you are searching, a monster stalks you and attacks. The Zargon player places the wandering monster listed in the quest book on a square next to you. The monster attacks immediately. return this card to the bottom of the deck. This is really the one time that you will find that Zargon has the upper hand, because normally the heroes go first and Zargon goes last, which essentially means quite possibly all the monsters you ever come across when you open a room, okay, open the door to a room, are going to be destroyed by all the characters before Zargon gets to make a turn or do anything. But this is that one time where that all changes. So if the barbarian is searching, finds a wandering monster, and it just happens to be a mummy, okay, if that's the wandering monster, and I doubt they would use a wandering monster, that's a mummy, but let's say it is, then it would attack. So you would then look at the monster stat block for, or the monster card for that particular creature. It would make its attacks, and cool blimey, can I find it? Here we go. Here it is. So this is the mummy. So the mummy, when it attacks, uses 3 attack dice. So against our barbarian, I get 1 skull. The others are shields, so that means nothing. So potentially 1 wound. Our barbarian will defend with 2 combat dice. And I get 1 shield. So I can stop that 1 skull getting through. So there's no wounds caused. The barbarian doesn't lose a body point. Wandering monsters are a really useful tool for Zargon players. They really are. And the more you play through the deck, and if you have to flip it and start again, you're going to find that the deck is full of wandering monsters. Next. We get into hazards and traps. Now there are traps that are set out that are slightly different to everything else. This is one time where the trap operates differently. This hazard or trap is very specific to the card. Hazard. While you are searching, a hidden arrow shoots from the wall and strikes you. You lose 1 body point, and your turn is over. Return this card to the bottom of the deck. So you might have moved, you've searched, or you just searched but you didn't move, which you can do. It would end your turn. There is no defending from this hazard or trap. You lose 1 body point, and that's it. Okay? And there are quite a few of these in the deck for treasure. The last one is a slightly different hazard. Suddenly the stone beneath your feet gives way. You fall into a shallow hole, losing 1 body point and end your turn. You may climb out and move normally on your next turn. Return this card to the bottom of the deck. So in other words, hazards, wandering monsters always get returned to the deck, but your treasure, the things that you really want, they don't get put back in the deck once you actually select them. So there's no defending from this. If you fall in a trap like this, that's it. You're going to lose 1 body point. Okay, just give me a second. Let me just pop up here. So that is the gist of HeroQuest in terms of, you know, how you make attacks, how you defend as a hero, how you make an attack with a monster, how you defend as a monster, the various different types of treasure cards that are available to you that you can select. The artifacts. Now artifacts aren't going to show up when you go. If you search for treasure, you might find the artifact, but it doesn't mean that you're drawing a treasure card and you get the artifact. It doesn't work that way. If you search for treasure and you're the first person to search for treasure in that room, you will probably find the artifact before anybody else if it is positioned in that room. But you do not draw or give them the artifact card and allow them to draw from the treasure card pile as well. You just get the one. After the artifact has been taken by one of the hero players, then you're drawing from the treasure deck. And you'll use the treasure deck the most out of everything else, essentially. Let me drink some water. Now, I highly recommend, look, I'm going to say it now. I highly recommend really considering HeroQuest as an introductory game for those of you who are interested and are trying to play with, say, your kids or your family, and they're just not... If you can't convince your family or your friends to play the full-blown role-playing game that you want to play, whether that's D&D, Pathfinder, or something else, because it's too complicated, this game is not complicated. I think this game, HeroQuest, is far superior to the D&D or Dungeons & Dragons board games that were put out many years ago. The benefit of the Dungeons & Dragons board games is there's no game master, there's no Zargon player, there's nobody who has to look after the monsters. So that's always nice when you can do that, so you can have everybody being part of the adventuring group. But this is certainly much more of a transition into full-blown D&D or fantasy role-playing, okay, in terms of tabletop stuff anyway. The aspect that you might be seeing and thinking, wow, what about the dialogue, Fred? You can actually include dialogue into this game very easily. And I'm going to talk more about a process for actually adjudicating that using home rules or homebrew rules, should I say. And we'll do that. There's a lot of people who are doing all sorts of interesting things. Hacking HeroQuest is quite common. One, to get you from this game to another game. But yeah. Is it cooling down there in New Zealand? Not really. Not really. I'm going to get rid of the hat. The weather is changing a little bit, and there's so many people have been getting sick around me that I'm starting to get a little funny in the throat. I can feel that mucus forming. It's great. Wonderful. I love that. I live for that stuff. Yeah. I probably should have taken the hat off, or probably would have made life a lot more comfortable for me. Anyway, it's gone now. All right, let's finish up this poll here. And I might just finish early for today. Now, what am I going to do next week? My hope is that I can come back to HeroQuest and I'll cover magic. There are, how many spells? 12 hero spells to go over, and a bunch of dread spells for the evil wizards and evil mages and evil necromancers that you'll be using in this game. So there's a bunch of cards and spells for that. All that stuff is magic. So I'll be covering magic next week, hopefully. And the week after, I'll go through a raft of different HeroQuest homebrew rules so that you can hack the game and do whatever you need to do with it to make it do the things you want it to do. Okay? Because people do try to use this as a transition into full-blown tabletop role-playing games. Just because it is so simple. The only things you're doing is adding, skulls together and subtracting shields. So it's very simple. You're dealing with such small numbers, it's easy. It's easy mathematics. Okay, have you played HeroQuest? 40% said yes. Okay, cool. No, 33%. Just watching, 20%. Not sure, 6% out of 15 votes. Well, I'm glad to hear that there are some people who are not sure. I put this in. I can only give you 3 options. So I'm always thinking when I put these polls up, how can I give you as many options as possible so that you can respond to it? Because just yes and no is probably not going to work for everybody. Do you know what I mean? Some people just want to say, I'm just watching. I'm not really, when you say I'm just watching, it means I'm probably not that interested in HeroQuest, but I'm here because I want to support Fred, more than likely. Not sure is, I was probably drunk when I was playing HeroQuest. I might have played it or might not have. Or it was such a long time ago, I just don't remember. And yes is, I do remember and I did like playing the game, or I do remember and I don't like playing the game. And no is, no, I've not played the game, but maybe I've heard of it, maybe I haven't. So it's that's where I'm going with this. What is happening tomorrow? Tomorrow I'm playing Back Me Dungeons & Dragons, people. And I'll be playing it over on Wally DM's channel. For those of you who are unaware of Wally DM is one of my buddies. We get along very well, and we are going to be playing through with a bunch of people. He has, I don't want to even tell you what he's got, what scheme he has. He's got a fun idea going. I thought it was amusing. We're probably going to try to mess with Wally as much as we possibly can. We'll be playing at level 5. I believe most of the characters have 20,000 experience points. We're going to be going for it. Okay, we're definitely going to be hopefully creating some entertaining moments for that one. So I'm hoping that's something you guys can come and join us for. Also tomorrow, before I do that live stream with him, I'll be doing a revamping of the Warforged and the Thicreen race for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. My home group would like some changes done, and so that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to rebuild them. I'll do that as a live stream before I go and play with Wally DM in his Beck Me Dungeons & Dragons game. This is part of the Game Master Roundtable. Who's going to be there? I'm going to tell you who's going to be there. AJ Pickett. I know AJ, both from New Zealand. We get along pretty well, so he's going to come and play. He's already got a character lined up. I'm not going to tell you what that character is, though. I'll be there, of course. Wally will be the Game Master or Dungeon Master. Mr. Welsh, those of you who know Glenn, Mr. Welsh has his own YouTube channel, and he does a lot of Mystara lore. Indo-Structo Boy Taryn will be joining us. It's his first time playing Beck Me Basic D&D. Taryn Indo-Structo Boy has never played Dungeons & Dragons Basic, okay? And this will be his first time. I don't know exactly what he's playing, but it really doesn't matter. We are probably going to, the rest of us are probably going to do some silly stuff, for sure. Probably just to see what Taryn's response is going to be. We just can't help ourselves. D&D Homebrew, KR King, Kevin is going to be joining us. Kevin has played Beck Me Basic D&D. He'll be joining us for that game. And then we have Wisdom Check Jake. Jake will be joining us, also has a YouTube channel. And Jake is definitely crazier than I am, and does the most peculiar things, and will probably definitely be, I would say this is definitely adult-rated stuff. Do not expect this to be tame, okay? When you stick the likes of, even when you were dealing with Mr. Welsh, do not expect that Wisdom Check, D&D Homebrew, Indo-Structo Boy, Mr. Welsh, Wally, myself, AJ Pickett, you combine those people, things are going to be pretty nuts, okay? I just hope that we don't get Wally into too much trouble. Anyway, that's what's going on. I'm going to get out of here. I will return next week to do some more HeroQuest stuff. And I will see those of you tomorrow who want to hang out and watch me try to redesign and remaster the Warforged class, Warforged race, and the Thicreen race as well for D&D 5e. You're welcome to join me. It will not be that long because I can't afford to do that. Anyway, thank you to everybody who's been watching and listening. Thank you to everybody who took part in the poll. I want to thank all of my patrons who support me on Patreon. Without you, it is impossible to make this work, and I really need your support to do that more than ever. As YouTube becomes more and more kind of chaotic and nuts, it has become even more important than it has ever been. So thank you so much for doing so. I want to thank those people who commented in the chat. So Calrell, thank you. Specifically, I want to call out Pale Rider. Pale Rider, thank you for being here. Thank you for actually chatting with me, chucking in some comments there. It really makes a big difference. Now I know I'm not alone in talking to nobody in a room with the door and the window open and like a crazy person. So thank you very much. So wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours, and hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Or you can roll 6-sided dice. That's fine too.